Okay, so Ben's apartment is another one of those disturbing, strange David Lynch spaces. Um, it's populated by weirdos and sort of oddball people in the background. These women sort of serving people, and Ben is such a strange character. His apartment's very strange. Um, it's a bizarre, disorienting space. Notice, by the way, that there are blue curtains in the beginning of the movie and red curtains behind Isabella Rossellini when she sings, and then when she's having sex with Kyle MacLachlan, we see those curtains in her apartment a couple of times. And in Ben's apartment, there are green curtains, and he performs in front of the green curtains, just like Dorothy Valens performs in front of red curtains. It's a recurring thing in the film that's just worth noticing. Um, Ben is interesting and complicated. Ben is a character who is he acts feminine in a very particular way. He acts sure, Frank, of course, Frank. Um, he acts feminine in a particular way. He acts feminine like he is in an old Hollywood movie. Uh, he smokes a cigarette at the end of a long, he has like a stick, a cigarette holder that he smokes with. That was something that women did when they didn't want to make their fingers stained with tobacco. He dresses in this kind of dramatic, sort of spotted animal print kind of coat, and he has this very kind of languid, sort of effeminate, like, oh, of course, Frank. Um, he acts like an old Hollywood starlet. He has some like white pancake makeup on his face, and he's very like overly expressive. Like he says, "Sure, Frank, here's to your fuck." And his eyes go back to being sleepy all the time. And it's a kind of druggy look, but it's also like an old Hollywood kind of Betty Davis, 1940s actress kind of look. Ben is, and when we get to Sunset Boulevard, you will see a character who is a little bit like Ben. Norma Desmond, the main character in Sunset Boulevard, is a little bit like Ben. Sunset Boulevard is one of David Lynch's very favorite movies. Um, Ben Ben is an interesting character, and I do want to talk about Ben for a hot second. What makes Ben interesting, the most interesting about Ben, is that Frank likes him. He's the only character in the movie that Frank seems to actually like, which is crazy. You'd think Frank would call him a sissy or a pussy or something and beat him up, and Frank loves Ben. It's the only Ben can calm Frank down, can help him. He insists everyone else be nice to Frank. I mentioned, by the way, that Freud had this theory that the fathers give the rules and the mothers do the taking care of, and that's why you see Frank, who's crazy, do the rules. He says to Kyle MacLachlan, "Be polite," and here's to Ben, and then Kyle MacLachlan doesn't say here's to Ben, and he says, "Be polite." He's like enforcing the rules in a fucked up kind of way. Um, Ben is the only person that Frank really seems to enjoy. Um, it's worth noticing why that. There's something that I think is why that might be. Ben appears to be a sort of biological man who is effeminate. He performs femaleness. He performs womanhood. He acts effeminate like a woman. Um, he lips and even the lip syncing when he sings and he kind of sways and he has a very kind of effeminate um, sort of posture and voice and affect. This is interesting because in the scene where Frank sort of was assaulting Dorothy, Frank was performing masculinity. He wasn't actually raping her because it seems like he might be impotent or something. Is he too weak to? He can't rape her because it's his penis isn't doing what he wants it to do. And his drugs involved. It's complicated. But the point is that Frank performs masculinity. At one point later in the movie, he says, "Feel my muscles." It's like he's so manly. It's like over the top masculinity, over the top manly, like he's performing being a man, like big on a stage so people in the back row can tell. Ben is performing femaleness or womanhood in an overly dramatic way so people in the back row can tell. So what they have in common is that they are it's one thing because sort of people will be like, oh, women are like this and men are like this, and that's not really true in all places and in all decades. Um, but these two characters are performing gender. I don't. It's not worth it to go on a whole thing about RuPaul's Drag Race. But one of the points of drag performances, which is where men get dressed up like women but in an over exaggerated way, is this idea that when we talk about what it means to be a man or a woman, what we're often talking about is performing. It's a performance that you do. If you've ever had anybody say, "Act like a lady" or "Be a man," like You can't just be like, I have a penis, I'm a man. They want you to act a certain way because apparently there's more to being a man than having a penis, and they want you to act a certain way because you can't be like, I have a vagina, I'm a lady. They say, no, act like a lady. Gender is a performance, not a biological category at all. And that's something that both Ben and Frank have in common. They perform gender in an over the top way that they appear to have gotten from movies. Like Frank acts like a movie gangster, and Ben acts like an actress in a movie from the 1950s. And and that's something that even though that you think they wouldn't get along, that's I think the thing they have in common that allows them to get along. Um, and then and Frank Ben lip syncs this sort of strangely he needs a microphone, but instead of a microphone, he has a lamp, which is an odd choice. And he sings this song. And one of the things about Frank that's amazing is like Alex in A Clockwork Orange, he is a terrible monster who is very moved by beautiful music. He's crying when Isabella Rossellini sings Blue Velvet, and he seems very moved. He's like lip syncing along with Ben lip syncing to Candy Colored Clown, which that's not the name of the song, but that's what he calls it. And he's very moved by it. And then suddenly he kind of snaps out of it, and sort of freaks out. And they leave. And in this great piece of editing, he screams, "Y'all fuck anything that moves!" And then, boom, they all vanish, and the camera stays in the room, and they all just like pop out of it, like they teleported or something. And of course, they didn't really teleport. But the idea is that there's something so aggressive that the editing can't handle it. The movie is having trouble keeping up with them. We can't even watch them exit the apartment; they just vanish. That's like that. That's why they feel like supernatural demons without actually being supernatural demons. Um, and then Frank takes Kyle MacLachlan out to Meadow Lane, which is a phrase we've heard before. It seems to be where Don got his ear cut off. Um, and again, this ritual, this idea of ritual. He lit the candle, he cut the blue velvet off of Isabella Rossellini's dress, and it's stuffed in the mouth, and he's got the gas, and he performs this thing, and he blows the candle out. He says, now it's dark. There's something similar going on in Meadow Lane. He assaulted Dawn in Meadow Lane, and now he's going to assault Kyle MacLachlan in Meadow Lane. And again, you've got the music that he loves. He puts lipstick on his face and kisses Kyle MacLachlan. The complicated world of sexuality where Dennis Hopper is daddy, but Dennis Hopper is also the baby. Here, Dennis Hopper is the woman. It's a sort of fascinating thing where he's sort of the song is playing. He puts the blue velvet in Kyle MacLachlan's mouth, and you think Kyle MacLachlan's going to get killed. But he says, "Feel my muscles," right? He's performing masculinity and femininity at the same time. And then he makes this important link between sex and violence, which the movie has been thinking about the whole time. Which he says, "I'm going to send you a love. You know what a love? I'm going to give you a love letter. You know what a love letter for me is a bullet from a fucking gun." That link between love letters and bullets, sex and violence are intimately connected in this movie in ways that are very difficult for Kyle MacLachlan to process, very difficult for us to process watching the movie, and very difficult for a lot of adults to process as they move into sort of the complicated world of adult sexuality. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah. All right. And the other thing that I want to kind of point out is this key moment when Dennis Hopper, they're in the car. Kyle MacLachlan's in the car, and Dennis Hopper's fucking with Isabella Rossellini, and Kyle MacLachlan says, "Leave her alone." And Dennis Hopper's like, "You're next." And very crucially, Dennis Hopper, he does the gas, and he looks at Kyle MacLachlan, and he says, "You're like me." Very, very important to notice where David Lynch places the camera. David Lynch places the camera in the back seat, and Dennis Hopper says, You're like me." And he's talking to Kyle MacLachlan because Kyle MacLachlan is like Dennis Hopper. He is sort of fucked up in the same way, where he wants to have sex with and hurt Isabella Rossellini. But please notice, and Kyle MacLachlan's been worried, is he becoming like Dennis Hopper? He hit Isabella Rossellini. Maybe he's like Dennis Hopper. But the camera placement means that when Dennis Hopper delivers the line, "You're like me," he's not delivering it like this in Kyle MacLachlan's ear. He says, "You're like me." It's you. He's talking to you, the audience. You're the ones that have been watching him in this movie after he said, "Don't look at me, don't ever fucking look at me." You kept watching. You wanted that fucked up stuff. And then the question is, are you like Frank? Do you want violence? Do you want that kind of sexualized violence? And that's something that the viewers of the film have to decide for themselves. Kyle MacLachlan is struggling with, am I like Frank? But the people watching the movie who haven't turned it off yet, by the way, are struggling with the question of, are they also like Frank? And that really is the key moment in the movie where Kyle MacLachlan is confronted with the same problem the audience is confronted with. And it's David Lynch's camera placement that makes that work. Okay, I'll see you in the next bit.